I had always believed I was in a solid, loving relationship. We had built something strong over the years, or at least that's how I thought. From the outside, everything seemed perfect. The dates, the laughs, the shared dreams. We had our ups and downs, sure, but nothing major ever shook us. I always trusted them, no question. It felt like a fairy tale that had become real. We had our future planned, our little quirks that defined us as a couple. We even talked about growing old together, creating a family, and making memories. It was beautiful, almost unreal. But deep down, there were things I never fully questioned. Things I had brushed aside. It wasn't that I suspected anything at first. It was more of an unsettling gut feeling that I couldn't quite place. Over time, I started noticing little shifts, things I couldn't ignore anymore. They were small at first, subtle changes in behavior. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild, or maybe I was just overthinking things. But it didn't feel right. I tried to brush it off as just stress. Maybe their job was demanding more of their time, or maybe they were just going through something personal. I told myself I was being paranoid. But there were moments where I caught them glancing at their phone a little too quickly when I walked into the room, or when they started acting distant, like they had something to hide. I didn't want to think about it, didn't want to acknowledge it. I ignored my suspicions, hoping they'd just go away. After all, what was there to worry about? We were happy, weren't we? Then came that day, the day that everything came crashing down. It wasn't a dramatic, movie-style moment. It wasn't some huge argument that led to the truth spilling out. It was simple, almost painfully simple. It happened while we were having breakfast together. They had left their phone on the table, just like they always did. For a split second, I glanced at it. Maybe it was a mistake, but there was a message on the screen from someone I didn't recognize. The name wasn't familiar, and the text was too friendly, too intimate for my comfort. At first, I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid again. It could have been a work colleague, or a friend they'd known from before. But then I looked closer. The way they wrote, the tone, it wasn't professional, it wasn't platonic. There was something off about it. A sick feeling started crawling at my chest, but I tried to ignore it. I didn't want to confront something I wasn't ready to face. So I did what anyone would do. I acted normal. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask. Instead, I tried to pretend that the moment had never happened, hoping my mind would just let it go. But my mind wouldn't let it go. Every part of me screamed that something wasn't right, that I needed to know the truth. The nagging feeling only grew stronger. The next few days were a blur. I tried to push everything to the back of my mind, to live in a moment and pretend like things hadn't shifted, but they had. I noticed more things that didn't add up. They were out more often than usual, staying late at work, claiming to be with friends when I knew they weren't. But it was still subtle, and I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. But deep down, I knew it wasn't going to go away. It wasn't going to fix itself. And then one evening, when they were out, I couldn't stop myself. I went through their phone. I wish I could say I had a better reason, but I didn't. I was scared. I was hurting already, and I had to know. I had to have answers. The messages were there, numerous exchanges that made my stomach drop. They weren't just conversations between old friends. There was flirting, compliments, a level of intimacy that I couldn't ignore. It was there, right in front of me, in black and white. My worst fear confirmed. They had been lying. They were seeing someone else. The room felt like it was spinning. My heart hammered in my chest. I could barely breathe. I didn't know what to do with the information I had. The person I had trusted, the person I had shared my life with, had betrayed me. The love I thought we had, the trust one believed we'd built, was all a lie. I tried to process what I was seeing, but it was too much. My emotions were all over the place. Anger, confusion, sadness. I didn't know who I was anymore. Everything felt fake. The love we shared, the moments we had, the promises we'd made. Everything was tainted. In that moment, I didn't know what to do. I didn't know whether to confront them, to scream, to cry. It felt like my world was crumbling, and I had no control over it. There was no going back from this. I wanted to believe that maybe there was a mistake, that I had misinterpreted what I was seeing. But deep down, I knew the truth. I knew that everything I thought I knew was a lie. And the most painful part? I still loved them. Even after everything, part of me still wanted to believe that this wasn't real. But reality had already set in. I couldn't breathe. The phone felt heavier in my hands than it had ever before. I stared at the screen, the messages blurring in front of my eyes. My chest tightened, and it felt like I was suffocating, but I couldn't look away. The truth was there, staring me in the face, and I couldn't deny it any longer. The betrayal was real. The love I had trusted was now something else entirely, something tainted, something shattered. It didn't matter that we had shared years of memories, hopes, and dreams. It didn't matter that I had believed in us. It was all gone now, replaced by this overwhelming weight of anger, disbelief, and deep, gnawing sadness. I closed the phone, hand shaking. I tried to breathe, to make sense of what I had just uncovered. But I couldn't. My mind raced, trying to piece together how it had come to this. How could I have been so blind? How had I missed the signs? The love I thought was a constant, the trust one thought was unbreakable, was nothing more than an illusion. I didn't want to face it, but I had to. This wasn't something I could ignore. This wasn't a misunderstanding, a miscommunication. It was betrayal. Raw, painful betrayal. The days that followed felt like a blur. I couldn't shake the weight of the betrayal, and it seemed like the world had gone on spinning without me. I couldn't move, couldn't think clearly. My emotions were stuck in a constant loop: anger, sadness, confusion, and then numbness. I wasn't even sure how to breathe properly, how to live in this new reality where everything I knew had been turned upside down. It wasn't just my heart that hurt, it was my entire body. It was like I was carrying a heavy weight, something that was both physical and emotional. I couldn't escape the feeling of being trapped inside a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The worst part was how disconnected I felt. I would sit for hours, staring blankly at the walls, trying to understand what had happened. How could I have missed it? How could I have trusted someone so completely, only for them to betray me like this? It wasn't just the affair. It was the lies, the deception, the manipulation. I had been living in a false reality, and now I had to confront it. I couldn't even think straight. Every moment, every thought, seemed like it was tainted by what I had discovered. I couldn't escape it. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't go to work. Every time I thought about facing people, talking to friends, or just being around anyone, it felt like I would break. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want anyone to see how broken I was inside. It wasn't just the emotional pain, it had become physical. My body felt heavy, like I was carrying a weight that wouldn't let me stand up. My legs felt like lead, and every step I tried to take was an effort I couldn't muster. For days, I couldn't walk without feeling like I was going to collapse. I didn't know if it was the shock, the grief, or just the overwhelming sense of betrayal that had paralyzed me. But I couldn't do anything. I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't face the world. I couldn't even face myself. Every time I tried to make sense of what had happened, I felt like I was drowning in my own thoughts. I wasn't sure if I was physically unable to walk or if I just couldn't bring myself to do it. My mind had become my prison. Friends and family called, but I didn't pick up. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to explain that my entire world had crumbled. I couldn't even explain it to myself. It was like I was stuck in a loop, replaying the betrayal over and over in my mind. The voice on the other end of the phone would ask how I was doing, and all I could do was sit there, silent, because I didn't know how to put it into words. How do you tell someone you feel like you've lost everything? How do you explain the emptiness that was swallowing you whole? I tried to get out of bed at one point, but the moment I stood up, my legs gave way beneath me. I fell to the floor and lay there, staring at the ceiling. I wasn't sure if it was from the physical exhaustion or the emotional pain, but I couldn't get up. It wasn't just the emotional toll that kept me down, it was the physical toll. It was like the weight of my emotions had manifested in my body, and I couldn't escape it. Every time I tried to stand, my legs would shake, and I'd collapse again. It was as if I was trapped inside my own body, too exhausted, too broken to function. As the days passed, I slowly began to realize that I couldn't stay like this. I couldn't keep drowning in this ocean of despair. I had to make a choice. But even thinking about that felt like too much. How could I choose anything when I felt like I had nothing left? I didn't know if I was strong enough to pick up the pieces of my life, but I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I had to get up. I had to find a way to move forward, even if I didn't know how. In the midst of all this pain, I realized that I was still holding on to something: hope. It was the smallest thing, barely a flicker, but it was there. The idea that someday I might be able to heal. Maybe not right away, and maybe not in the way I expected, but I knew I couldn't keep living like this. The betrayal had shattered me, yes. But I had to believe that I could heal, that I could learn to walk again, both physically and emotionally. It wasn't going to be easy, and I didn't know how long it would take, but I had to start somewhere. It was the only choice I had left. I started small. I got up again, slowly, and this time I didn't fall. I still didn't know what to do with the pain, but at least I was moving. The first steps felt like I was crawling out of a hole, and even though my legs still felt weak, I forced myself to keep going. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in that moment, even if it was just for a few seconds, I felt like I had taken back a small piece of myself. A small victory, but it was enough to remind me that I wasn't completely lost. I wasn't sure if I could forgive them. I wasn't sure if I could ever trust again. But at least I was taking the first step towards healing. The days after the betrayal became a blur of emotions, but slowly, I began to find some semblance of clarity. The pain, though still present, wasn't as consuming as it had been in those first few days. I had started to take a step back, to analyze the situation for what it was, rather than letting my emotions rule me completely. It was painful, but necessary. I knew I couldn't live in the shadows of anger and hurt forever. I couldn't keep letting this betrayal define me. But even as I tried to move forward, the question that haunted me was whether I could truly forgive them. Could I ever trust again? Could I ever be the same person I was before? At first, the idea of forgiveness seemed impossible. How could I forgive someone who had torn apart my life, someone who had made me question everything I thought I knew about love and trust? I couldn't see past the pain, couldn't see how any kind of reconciliation could be possible. But then, as the days went by, I realized that forgiveness wasn't just about them. It wasn't about letting them off the hook or pretending like it didn't happen. Forgiveness, I started to understand, was for me. It was about letting go of the anger that had consumed me, the bitterness that was slowly eating away at me. It was about freeing myself from the emotional chains that had kept me trapped in that moment of betrayal. But even knowing that, I wasn't sure I was ready. I still loved them. That was the hardest part. As much as I wanted to be angry, as much as I wanted to hate them for what they had done, there was a part of me that still cared. A part of me that still held on to the memories of the person I thought they were. That love was still there, buried beneath the hurt, but it didn't change the reality of what had happened. The trust was gone. The foundation of our relationship had been shattered. And though I could still feel love for them, I knew that love alone wasn't enough to repair what had been broken. I started to realize that healing wasn't going to be a linear process. There were moments when I felt like I was making progress, and then there were moments when it felt like I